Have you ever left a conversation feeling smaller? Not because of what was said, but because of what was not said. The way your joy was met with silence. The way your vulnerability felt like inconvenience. The way you started the day feeling steady and left feeling unsure of yourself. It's subtle. No explosions, no betrayal you can point to. Just a quiet unraveling of who you thought you were. You tell yourself, maybe I'm tired. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm expecting too much. But what if the truth is simpler? What if you didn't lose a friend, you just finally saw them clearly? We often mistake longevity for loyalty. We think time served together earns them a permanent place in our story. But the Stoics remind us, do not cling to what no longer serves the present moment. Friendship, real friendship, should make you feel more alive, more honest, more you. And yet so many of us hold on to people who dim our light, cloud our thoughts, and leave us second-guessing ourselves in the name of loyalty. But loyalty without clarity isn't noble. It's self-betrayal. And I say that not with judgment, but with experience. Because I used to think being a good friend meant always being there, always saying yes, always making space, even when it hurt, even when the laughter stopped feeling safe, even when the energy after every meetup left me feeling more anxious than anchored. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone, and you're not the problem. You're waking up. And awakening, though painful, is the beginning of peace. This video is not about cutting people off with bitterness. It's not about creating walls or living in suspicion. It's about recognizing when the connection you're maintaining is costing you your clarity. Because friendship at its best is a mirror, not a cage. And when the reflection you see in someone's presence makes you feel small, unsure, unworthy, it's time to stop blaming your feelings and start trusting them. At True Stoic Way, we explore these quiet truths, not to judge others, but to come home to ourselves. So if you've ever left a conversation feeling like you had to shrink to stay connected, if you've ever paused before speaking your truth out of fear of being mocked, dismissed, or quietly resented, stay with me. Because what follows isn't a checklist, it's a path. One paved with hard-won clarity, stoic wisdom, and a deep knowing that your peace is worth protecting. You don't need anger to walk away. You don't need a breakdown. You just need to see clearly, and seeing clearly starts now. It usually starts the same way. They ask to meet, or call unexpectedly, or drop by just to talk. And you say yes, because that's what friends do. They sit down and almost immediately, it begins. A flood of problems, complaints, disappointments, gustos, some justified, some exaggerated, all delivered with the same intensity as if the weight of their entire life now rests squarely in your hands. You listen, you nod, you absorb. You try to find the right words, not to fix it, but to offer something solid, something safe. But by the end of the hour, you're tired, not just mentally, not just emotionally. It's something deeper, like someone reached inside and quietly unplugged your soul. You step back into your day hollowed out. And here's the part we don't like to admit. They never ask about you. Not really. And if they do, it's a formality. A short pause before circling back to the chaos they carry like a favorite coat. And the worst part, you don't even blame them. You tell yourself they're struggling. They need someone. I'm just being a good friend. But when every interaction starts to feel like a performance in which you play the supporting role, you have to stop and ask yourself, when did my presence become a container for it's like they don't want to carry alone? There was a time I had a friend like this. He had charisma, intensity, charm. People were drawn to him, and for a while, so was I. Every conversation felt urgent, dramatic, important. I told myself I was lucky to be someone he trusted. But over time, the pattern emerged. He never asked about my life. Not once, and when I tried to share, he'd pivot back to his stress, his conflict, his world. It wasn't friendship, it was audience management. And I was the front row seat he could always count on. At first, I didn't see it. I thought being needed was the same as being valued. But it's not. Being someone's emotional crutch is not the same as being truly seen. And I started to notice something deeper. The more time I spent with him, the more anxious I became in my quiet moments. Like I was carrying something that didn't belong to me. And in truth, I was. That's when Stoicism began to make sense in a way it never had before. I remembered a line from Epictetus: "We must not allow another to take possession of our mind." And that includes those who offload their storms onto you without ever checking to see if you're already drowning in your own. Friendship is not a therapy session you never signed up for. It's not a stage you're forced to stand on while someone else delivers their monologue. A real friend, even in their pain, pauses, checks in, returns the gaze. They don't just speak, they see. And if you're walking away from every conversation feeling used, uncentered, disoriented, that's not just a feeling, that's data. And it matters. Because the people around you are not neutral. They shape your thoughts, your energy, your sense of self. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." But what he didn't need to spell out was what we all now understand intuitively. The quality of your thoughts is shaped by the company you keep. If someone is always emptying themselves into you and never once refilling your spirit, that's not connection. That's a slow erosion of your center. And the more you normalize it, the more you begin to believe this is what friendship is supposed to feel like. But it's not. You were not born to be a background character in someone else's crisis. You were not placed here to be drained dry under the banner of being there. There's a quiet kind of strength in being available, but there's a deeper kind of wisdom in knowing when it's time to step back and say, without resentment, without performance, "I cannot carry this for you, not like this, not anymore." And that's not abandonment, that's alignment. At True Stoic Way, we talk often about this gentle turning point where love meets limits, where empathy meets edges, where your energy begins to matter again. So if this story reminds you of someone, if your body tightens at the thought of another conversation that leaves you feeling small, you're not alone, you're not cold. You're simply waking up to the truth your nervous system has been whispering for a long time. You deserve mutual presence, not performance. You deserve space to speak, not just space to absorb. You deserve to leave a conversation feeling lighter, not lonelier. And the moment you believe that fully, the right people start to feel more visible because the wrong ones no longer blend in. There's a different kind of exhaustion. It doesn't come from being talked over or from carrying someone else's chaos. It comes from sharing something beautiful and watching it shrink in someone else's silence. You tell them you've been promoted and they raise their eyebrows. Are you sure you can handle that kind of pressure? You mention a trip you've saved for and they chuckle. Those places are overrated, touristy, probably not worth the money. You talk about starting something new, a business, a habit, a relationship, and suddenly the energy in the room changes. Not loud, not angry, but colder, tighter. You came in with light and you leave carrying shadow. They call it concern. You want to believe it, but deep down, something aches. Something quiet says, why do I feel smaller after telling them something that should have made me feel bigger? This is the confusion we rarely talk about. When someone who calls themselves a friend doesn't outright tear you down, but slowly chips away at your confidence, your excitement, your momentum. You're not imagining it, and it doesn't make you fragile. It makes you aware. Because there are people who don't fear your failure. They fear your growth, not because they hate you, but because who you're becoming no longer keeps them comfortable. And so, they poke, they question, they remind you of old versions of yourself, ones that were easier to control, less threatening to their own sense of inadequacy. They say things like, you've changed, you're different now. You used to be more fun, more chill, more like me. And it stings, because somewhere in that sentence, you hear an accusation. But here's the Stoic truth. Growth is not betrayal, it is proof that you are alive. There was a time when I shared a dream with someone I thought would cheer for me. It wasn't anything wild, just something new, something mine. They looked at me and said, that's ambitious. Don't get your hopes up. And I remember thinking, Bondersten. Why does this hurt more than if a stranger had said it? Because when people close to you doubt your direction, it feels personal. And sometimes it is, but not in the way you think. It's not about you. It's about who they become in the presence of your evolution. Your growth reminds them of their stagnation. Your courage reminds them of their fear. And instead of rising with you, they pull. Just a little, just enough to make you question yourself, to make you hesitate before sharing again, to convince you that staying the same is safer for the friendship. But safety at the cost of truth isn't safety at all. It's quiet suffocation. And the Stoics never told us to shrink in the name of comfort. They told us to live in truth, to walk with virtue, to become who we are without apology. Seneca wrote, as long as you live, keep learning how to live. But not everyone around you is ready for the person you're learning to become. And that's not cruelty, that's clarity. You may feel guilt rising. Maybe I'm being arrogant. Maybe I should stay grounded. But there's a difference between humility and hiding. Hiding your growth to protect someone else's insecurity is not humility. It's self-abandonment. And you are not placed here to dim your joy so others don't feel threatened by the light. You're allowed to expand, to evolve, to pursue more without fearing you're too much. Because the people who truly love you, they don't flinch when you rise. They clap, they help you up, they make room. There's a question I began asking myself after every conversation with certain people. Do I feel more like myself or less after being with them? Not, were they nice? Not, did we laugh? But did I feel safe being fully me? And the answer changed everything. Some people don't attack your dreams directly. They just drop enough doubt to make you carry their fear as if it were your own. But fear isn't friendship, and love that only exists when you're not changing was never love. It was a contract, one you never signed, but were expected to honor anyway. So what do? Not rage, not perform, not confront to punish. Just observe and decide. At True Stoic Way, we talk often about this quiet discipline, the ability to see without needing to be seen, to choose yourself without needing permission, to grow without asking for applause. You don't need everyone to understand. You don't need validation from those who never truly saw you. You just need to honor the voice within you that knows, I am becoming someone I don't need to apologize for. And that version of you, the one you're stepping into, deserves a circle that doesn't shrink in your light, but stands taller in it. If this reflection feels familiar, if you've been doubting the very parts of you that are finally waking up, then you're not lost. You're just growing. And the people who can't walk with you as you rise, they were never meant to go the full journey. Let them stay behind with grace, because your path forward requires both hands, and you'll need them free. There's a subtle shift you don't notice at first. You start replying slower. You check your tone more than usual. You replay conversations after they end, wondering if you said too much or not enough. You stop mentioning things you care about. You let the jokes slide, even when they cut deep, because correcting them would be too serious. And you're already the one who takes things personally. So you laugh, even when it stings, even when your stomach tightens. Not because it's funny, but because it's safer. This is what it feels like when you start shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. You adjust your edges, round your truth, swallow your instincts for the sake of keeping the peace. But peace kept at the cost of your self-respect isn't peace. It's submission. And the more you tolerate, the more they assume it's okay. Because silence over time starts to sound like consent. I used to have a friend who was always just joking. He'd make comments about my goals, my appearance, my relationships, all with a smirk. He knew exactly where to aim. And every time I flinched, he'd laugh and say, "Relax, you're too sensitive." So I stopped flinching, at least on the outside. I started smiling through the discomfort, catching my breath mid-laugh, telling myself it's not a big deal. He's always been like this. But something inside me started to shrink. I became quieter around him, less expressive, more careful. Not because I respected him, but because I feared what he'd turn into a punchline. And this is how it happens. You become smaller, not all at once, but in pieces, one joke at a time, one ignored boundary at a time, one uncomfortable silence you choose not to interrupt, until one day you no longer recognize the version of you that shows up in their presence. You're agreeable, accommodating, careful, but never comfortable. The Stoics taught that integrity is not measured by how others treat you, but by what you allow. Epictetus said, "No person has the power to make you feel inferior without your consent." But consent is not always verbal. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's habitual. And when you laugh at the thing that hurts you enough times, they stop seeing it as hurtful because you taught them that it was okay. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep their comfort intact. You don't need to trade your dignity for a few minutes of forced laughter. Real friends don't build comfort by crossing your lines. They build it by respecting them, especially when it's inconvenient. If this feels familiar, if you've ever held your breath in a room full of people just to avoid making it awkward, you're not overreacting, you're noticing. And noticing is the beginning of clarity. At True Stoic Way, we often say, you don't need to explain your boundaries to people who already honor them. And if someone doesn't, no long speech will change that. But your behavior will. There's power in a simple shift. Next time someone says, "Relax, I'm just joking," try responding not with anger, but with clarity. "That didn't feel like a joke to me." Let the silence sit. Let them feel it. Because silence has weight too, but only when it belongs to truth. And sometimes the strongest boundary you'll ever set is a calm sentence that doesn't try to rescue the other person's discomfort. We're taught to be polite, to let things slide, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But there's a difference between giving grace and giving yourself away. Grace says, "I understand you made a mistake," but self-abandonment says, "I'll absorb the harm so you don't have to be uncomfortable." And that's not friendship. That's sacrifice in disguise. I remember the moment I stopped laughing. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just let the silence speak. And the person who once joked suddenly looked confused. Like I had broken a rule he never asked permission to write. I hadn't changed. I had just stopped pretending. And the moment I did, everything shifted. Not because he understood, but because I finally did. The Stoics didn't believe in being reactive. They believed in being rooted. Rooted in self-respect. Rooted in reason. Rooted in the ability to say, "This far, no further." And if someone walks away because of that, they were never walking with you. They were walking on you. And you were never meant to be a floor. So if you're tired of adjusting yourself to make others more comfortable, if you're tired of censoring your joy, your voice, your truth, just to avoid becoming that person, this is your moment. You don't have to be loud. You just have to be clear. Because boundaries aren't lines in the sand. They're the quiet proof that you finally decided you're worth protecting. If you're feeling this deeply, you're already on the path. And if you want a place to keep walking it, a place that honors silence, strength, and clarity, you're welcome here at True Stoic Way. Subscribe if this resonates, not for the algorithm, but for yourself. It always starts off sounding intimate. I'm only telling you because I trust you. Don't repeat this, but I thought you should know what they're really like. And at first it feels privileged, like you've been invited inside a circle that others don't get access to, like you're special. But soon the circle starts to tighten and the warmth begins to rot. Because what you thought was closeness was just shared secrecy, built not on trust, but on control. You see, the person who constantly talks about others isn't confiding in you. They're recruiting you. They're not offering vulnerability. They're testing how far you'll go to stay close to them. It took me too long to understand that. There was someone in my life who knew everything about everyone. Who was dating whom? Who was struggling behind the scenes? Who had failed, cheated, lied? They had a way of packaging it all as if it were concern. I just feel bad for them. They're such a mess right now. Someone needs to say something. But what I didn't see back then was that nothing they said was meant to help. It was meant to control the narrative. to elevate themselves, and to make sure they were always the one in the center of the story, even if that story wasn't theirs to tell. And here's what I learned the hard way. If someone can easily betray the privacy of others in your presence, they have already rehearsed how they will speak about you in your absence. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And when that moment comes, you'll remember every red flag you ignored, the casual way they revealed what was meant to be sacred, the times they laughed off gossip as harmless conversation, the way they made other people's pain feel like your entertainment. The Stoics were clear about this. Epictetus warned, don't allow yourself to be overheard talking about others. And if someone starts, walk away. Why? Because gossip isn't just a breach of character. It's a signal to yourself and to the world that you're willing to trade integrity for access. But what you gain in access, you lose in peace. Because gossip, even when wrapped in soft tones, is poison. It erodes trust. It deforms perception. It invites you to look down on people you have never truly seen. And worse, it blinds you to the quiet damage being done to your own reputation. Because you're not just a listener, you're now part of the echo. And eventually, you'll become its next subject. I remember the moment it changed for me. I had shared something personal, quietly, carefully, to someone I thought I could trust. Weeks later, a mutual friend referenced it, something oddly specific, something I hadn't told them. I asked where they'd heard it. They said casually, "Oh, I thought everyone knew. She mentioned it the other day." I went cold. Not because it was the worst thing she could have said, but because it confirmed what I had always suspected. It wasn't if she would speak about me, it was just when. And in that moment, I understood something deep. What people say with you is almost always a preview of what they'll say about you. The person who breaks someone else's confidence in your presence has already decided that the sacred can be made disposable. And if they can't protect what belongs to others, they won't protect what belongs to you. So what do you do with that truth? You don't confront with fire. You don't threaten, demand, or shame. You detach. You shift your energy from trusting their words to observing their patterns. Because words deceive, but patterns don't lie. And when you step back, you'll see it clearly. The constant need to inform, the selective compassion, the subtle triangulation between people. They're not telling you secrets, they're building leverage. And the only winning move is to stop playing. At True Stoic Way, we speak often about protecting peace, not just from external chaos, but from the noise that seeps in when we pretend toxicity is love, just because it smiles and shares stories with us. Real friendship feels clean, not perfect, but clear. There's no second guessing what they'll say when you're gone, because they've already proven who they are when you're not around. So here's a question worth carrying with you. Would I be okay with this person holding my story when I'm not in the room? If the answer isn't a strong yes, your silence is no longer safety, it's compliance. And the Stoics teach us that virtue cannot grow in soil polluted by duplicity. You deserve friends who defend your name when there's no applause for doing so. You deserve relationships where I trust you means protection, not performance. You deserve quiet that feels like peace, not suspense. And if that means letting go of people who have built their identity on being the messenger of everyone else's mess, so be it. Because letting go isn't judgment, it's discernment. And discernment is what allows your soul to breathe again. There's a quiet kind of disappointment that builds slowly over time. Not from arguments, not from betrayals, but from 1,000 small violations of something most people never think to protect. Your time. They say they'll be there. You clear your evening, adjust your plans, maybe even rearrange a few priorities. You show up on time, present, available, and then nothing. A late text, a last-minute cancellation. No apology, just an excuse wrapped in casual language. Something came up. Lost track of time. Rain check? And the worst part? They say it with ease. As if this wasn't the 3rd, 5th, or 10th time. As if you're expected to absorb it without question, without frustration, without consequence. It's easy to brush off once or twice. Life happens. But when someone continually treats your time, like it's optional, when they flake, show up late, or simply forget, they're not just being busy. They're showing you exactly how little they value your presence. Because respect isn't just about words, it's about rhythm, consistency, follow through. I once had a friend who was brilliant in bursts and absent in real life. Plans were always a maybe, promises were always loose. I learned to never fully count on him, even though I kept making space as if I could. There was a night I remember clearly. I had invited a few close friends to my home. Nothing extravagant, just a small gathering. I cleaned, cooked, prepared. He said he was coming, said he wouldn't miss it, and then, an hour before, a text, "Can't make it, something came up." No explanation, no care, just casual detachment. The rest of the night was fine, but part of me dimmed, because it wasn't just about that night. It was the realization that I was giving energy to someone who saw my effort as optional. The Stoics believed in protecting what cannot be replaced, and time, more than wealth, fame, or even knowledge, was sacred. Seneca wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." But what he didn't know, what we have to learn ourselves, is that the most dangerous way to waste time is by giving it to people who don't treat it with care. And here's the deeper truth. If someone disrespects your time, they're not just being careless, they're communicating. They're telling you that their world is more important, that your schedule is flexible, that your needs are negotiable. They may not say it directly, but patterns always speak louder than intentions. And we, hoping to stay connected, often bend. We shift our calendars, we silence our frustration. We convince ourselves they're just going through something. I don't want to seem dramatic. It's not a big deal. But it is a big deal, because every time you rearrange your life for someone who consistently forgets you, you teach yourself that your own time isn't worth guarding. And the longer that continues, the more you become a participant in your own depletion. You can't control whether someone respects your time, but you can control how many opportunities you give them to waste it. That's not cold. That's clarity. At True Stoic Way, we talk about self-respect as a posture, not a performance. It's the calm decision to stop making room for people who only show up when it's easy for them. It's choosing to honor your calendar, your effort, your presence, with the same reverence you've been giving away so freely. If someone is always late, always vague, always a step away from fully committing, notice how that makes you feel. Not just annoyed, but unseen, unimportant, invisible. And that feeling is not a flaw in you. It's a signal. So what's the Stoic response? You don't argue, you don't guilt, you don't beg for changed behavior. You change access. You stop chasing confirmations. You stop rearranging for the unreliable. You stop being the one who always adjusts. And you start protecting the one thing you'll never get back, your time. The next time someone cancels last minute, don't internalize it. Observe it. Ask yourself, is this who they are? Or is this who I've allowed them to become in my life? Because permission is powerful. And when you stop giving it, when you stop making it easy for people to treat you like a backup plan, everything shifts. Not because they suddenly change, but because you do. You stop bending and you begin to stand. I didn't stop being kind when I stopped being available. I stopped being exhausted. And there's a quiet kind of peace in not waiting for people who never really show up. A peace the Stoics knew well, not the peace of isolation, but the peace of alignment. You don't owe your time to anyone who takes it for granted, and you certainly don't owe your flexibility to someone who only values you when it's convenient. You can forgive people and still not give them your Saturday night. You can understand their struggles and still protect your calendar. You can love someone deeply and still say, I no longer have space for this dynamic. Because love without boundaries is not love, it's erosion. So if your time has become the thing others play with, cancel on, rely on when needed but forget just as easily, it's time to step back, not to punish, but to restore. Restore the value of your presence, the sanctity of your time, and the truth that real connection is never one-sided. If this feels real for you, if you're tired of carrying the weight of inconsistency, subscribe to True Stoic Way, because your time matters, and we're building a space where that truth is finally honored. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, where something in you finally shifts. It's not rage, it's not some dramatic confrontation. It's not even sadness, though there may be tears. It's something deeper. Still heavy like stone, but also light, because you've carried something too long. And now you're setting it down, not out of anger, but out of truth. You no longer feel the need to argue. You stop rehearsing what you'll say. You stop waiting for them to get it, to change, to finally value you the way you kept hoping they would. You stop because something inside you, some part of your soul that's grown quiet over the years, whispers, this isn't about them anymore. This is about you now. And in that moment, you realize you don't need closure. You don't need clarity from them. You just need permission from yourself. The world tells you that letting go should be loud, that self-respect looks like a monologue, a walkout, a dramatic declaration of worth. But the Stoics knew better. True power isn't in noise. It's in the calm decision to stop. I remember the day I stopped explaining myself to someone who never really listened. They had this way of turning every conversation into a mirror. Not one that reflected me, but one that showed them what they wanted to see. When I hurt, they minimized it. When I grew, they mocked it. When I spoke up, they spun it. And for a long time, I tried to fix it. I tried harder, softer, quieter, until I realized I wasn't speaking to a friend. I was performing for someone who only applauded when I stayed small. So one day I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I just stopped. And the silence that followed was the loudest self-respect I had ever heard. We think boundaries must always be spoken, but sometimes the strongest ones are made of action. You stop replying immediately. You stop rearranging your schedule. You stop laughing at jokes that hurt. You stop explaining why your standards are not negotiable. And in doing so, you reclaim something they were never meant to have: access. Epictetus once said, "The key is to keep company only with people who uplift you, whose presence calls forth your best." But here's what he didn't say outright, what life must teach us: that sometimes the first step to being with better people is to walk away from the ones who never made room for your wholeness. This is not bitterness. This is awakening. This is what it feels like when you stop choosing comfort over clarity. It's not easy. In fact, it may be one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because walking away means grieving the version of you that tolerated too much for too long. But that grief is sacred. It's the price of becoming. You are not too sensitive. You are aware. You are not too much. You are finally whole. And no, you are not overreacting. You're responding to the wisdom inside you that refuses to be ignored any longer. The body knows, before the mind catches up, before the words make sense. Your body whispers, this doesn't feel right. This isn't safe. This is not where you thrive. And when you stop dismissing that knowing, everything changes. Not immediately, not easily, but irrevocably. At True Stoic Way, we don't romanticize detachment. We don't glorify walking away just to appear strong. We talk about the quiet, brutal courage of listening to your inner stillness, of knowing that love is not enough if it costs you your voice, that history is not enough if it comes at the expense of your dignity, that they've been there for me is not a justification if being there now feels like being buried. The people who are meant for your life will not require you to vanish inside yourself to keep the connection alive. They will not shrink you, mock your healing, make your evolution a punchline. They will adjust with you, rise with you, reflect with you. And if someone can't, let them stay where they are. You were not meant to remain a version of yourself that only makes others comfortable. Growth is not betrayal, it's alignment. It may hurt. You'll miss parts of them. You'll grieve what was good. That's okay. Grief doesn't mean you made the wrong choice. It just means you're clearing the space for what's next. And what's next? Peace, stillness. People who don't confuse love with control, who don't see your boundaries as barriers, but as invitations to know the real you. There's a moment I return to often, a line I carry like armor. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." And that's it, isn't it? You don't need to debate whether they're wrong. You don't need to prove that you deserve better. You just need to live like you already believe it. No more shrinking, no more waiting, no more giving second chances to people who never took the first one seriously. If you've made it here to this part of the journey, you already know what needs to happen. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but the shift has begun. You've seen the truth, and the truth once seen cannot be unseen. So when the moment comes, and it will come, when you feel that quiet inner click that says enough, honor it. Don't dress it up with a speech. Don't drag it out with an argument. Just leave. Not in anger, but in peace. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started. And as you walk away from the noise, from the confusion, from the person you had to shrink to be with, walk gently, but don't look back, because what's ahead is not just distance, it's dignity. If this feels like truth in your chest, if even one sentence opens something in you, take a moment to reflect. And if it feels right, subscribe to True Stoic Way, not just for the words, but for the quiet reminder that you're not alone in this. Because choosing peace isn't passive, it's power, and power, real power, is always quiet at first. But once you feel it, you never go back. Let them go. Not with anger, not with bitterness, not with a need to prove anything. Just let them go. Not because they never meant anything, but because you now mean something to yourself. Some people enter your life to walk beside you. Some come to teach, and others to test your boundaries until you remember you have them. Letting go doesn't mean you didn't love. It means the love you gave out is finally returning home to you. There's a strange kind of freedom that comes not with fireworks, but with silence, the freedom of not waiting for a text, not needing their approval, not shrinking when their name comes up. You no longer need to fix what won't heal. You no longer need to explain your peace to those who only understood your chaos. This is what liberation looks like. And no, it doesn't always feel like victory at first. Sometimes it feels like loss. But loss, when it's aligned with truth, is never destruction. It's space cleared, sacred, ready for what's next. So if you've come this far, if something in you stirred while listening, if you felt called, challenged, or comforted, know this: you are not alone, and you are not broken. You are becoming the kind of person who knows when to hold on and when to release, the kind who values peace more than performance, clarity more than comfort, the kind who walks the true Stoic way. If something in this message touched you, leave a comment below. I choose peace. Let that be your quiet declaration. To yourself, to the past self, to the version of you that stayed too long. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, not for numbers, but to stay close to this kind of clarity, because peace isn't a place we find, it's a path we walk. Let's keep walking it together.